Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk to you about some short stories, a little bit about why I like reading short stories, and some specific short stories that I like to read. Normally, when I read, I tend to read novels, but there are short stories that I like reading as well. And when I was in school, high school and college, I had the opportunity to read a lot of different short stories, both in my Spanish classes and creative writing classes. One thing that I really like about short stories is that you can read them in a very short period of time, usually 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, and you can get that whole story without having to feel like you're taking up a lot of your time. Because they're much shorter than a novel, a writer can't really spend as much time going into as much detail with character development or the plot or other details, but they can use other techniques to still tell a really great story. Now I'm going to share a few of my favorite short stories, some that I've read in English and in Spanish, and I'll put links to them in the description, or at least their title and the name of the author. So as a creative writing minor, I read a few short stories by the author Raymond Carver, which is when I first learned about him. His overall writing style is minimalistic, where he doesn't really include a lot of specific details, but I personally really enjoyed that in his writing, and I loved a lot of his stories. I own his short story collection Cathedral, and I think one of my favorite stories in that book is called A Small Good Thing. I'll put a link to that in the description. Another author I was exposed to as a creative writing minor is Flannery O'Connor. Most of her stories were written in the Southern Gothic genre, which is sort of an offshoot of the Gothic genre, but set in the American South. And a lot of her stories kind of feature people that are kind of screwed up or maybe not the most moral. And it's kind of her commentary, I guess, on the region. Not necessarily how it is in real life, but using these elements to talk about the South where she was from. One of the short stories she's written that I really enjoyed is called A Good Man is Hard to Find. I definitely recommend that you read it, and I'll be sure to put a link to that in the description. Two other short stories, originally in English, that I enjoy are The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, which was set during the Vietnam War. It's so well written and a little bit sad, and I think I have a link to that as well. And then another story is An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce, which is set during the Civil War and was written in 1891. I actually read that for the first time in high school, and there was a short film based on the story that was produced in France and was actually an episode of The Twilight Zone, and I think it's a really good adaptation of the short story. Now, some of my favorite short stories that are originally written in Spanish are stories that I read either in high school or in college in Spanish classes, and now I luckily have tons of books with those same stories, so I can still read them on my own. One of my favorite short stories probably ever is called La Noche, Boca, Arriba, or The Night Face Up, by the Argentinian author Julio Cortázar. A lot of his stories, or the ones that I've read in general, seem to have a sort of cyclical pattern where they'll kind of start at one point, the story will progress, and it'll kind of lead back to something similar to the beginning. And I personally just really love this specific story. I'll try and link an English translation in the bottom so you can enjoy it as well. It definitely has a fantastic twist. I love it. I've read two short stories by the Uruguayan author Horacio Quiroga. One I first read in high school. It's called El Hijo, or The Son. And then another one I actually read 2 days ago called El almohadón de plumas, or The Feather Pillow. Due to some of his circumstances in his own life, a lot of his stories sort of have tragic themes or elements that are definitely reflected in these two stories as well. But the writing is great. And if I have links to translations, again, I'll put those below so that you can enjoy them as well. And finally, another one of my favorite stories is called El Sur, or The South, by Jorge Luis Borges, another author from Argentina. In this particular story, he kind of brings up a lot of elements related to Argentina's the South, the past with like the gauchos and all of that. And I just kind of like how the story kind of follows the main character kind of through his journey. And the ending's kind of interesting too. So, one of my probably overall favorite stories. So, like I said, those were a list of some stories that I really liked reading. Do you have any short stories? Do you like to read short stories, or do you prefer longer works? If there's any short stories that you like that you think other people should know about, please leave them in the comments. And if you celebrate anything like Christmas, anything coming up, I hope you have happy holidays, and I'll see you around next time.